Hi there and welcome back to the channel. So you might have heard a little game called Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is coming out at the end of February. If you haven't, then where have you been? One of the more interesting things about the Final Fantasy VII Remake project, of which Rebirth is part of, is how it canonises parts of the Final Fantasy VII compilation such as Before Crisis and Crisis Core. Crisis Core got its own remaster last year, but there's one game that's part of the compilation that seems to have been forgotten. So Dirge of Cerberus Final Fantasy VII was released back in 2006 for the PS2, and I've never played it. Now, opinions of this game seem rather polarised, as people either hate it and pretend it doesn't exist, or think it's a hidden gem on the system. When the game released, it got mixed reviews, and has a percentage score of 60% on game rankings and 57% on Metacritic. Now loads of people are theorycasting or talking up Rebirth, which I have nowhere near the amount of knowledge to do properly, but I wanted to get on board the Final Fantasy VII hype train in my own unique way. So I'm going to play through this one and share my thoughts on the game. As a little bit of a disclaimer, I'm not going to do a deep story dive or talk about how I think it's going to tie in with Rebirth. I'm just going to talk about the game under its own merits. Let's have a look. So upon opening up the menu, you see extra features. Very 2000s. And notice that there's an autosave feature. This is pretty unique for a PS2 title, so already I'm pretty impressed. I did have to give my PS2 memory card a bit of a blow before it worked though. The opening cinematic shows what Yuffie and Vincent were doing in the final cutscene of Final Fantasy VII. As they were optional characters in the original game, the dev team decided having them in the closing cinematic wouldn't have made sense, so they are kind of spliced in here in a "we're here too guys" kind of way. So for 2006, the cutscenes look incredible, and the voice acting is great.
Get out of there! I have a bad feeling about this!
I'm not sure that Yuffie is dressed for the weather though. Vincent runs through Midgar to basically make sure Hojo is dead after the party defeated him at the end of Final Fantasy VII. He's about to shoot him in the back before he's distracted by an explosion. He looks back and Hojo is gone. Yuffie then flies in on her weird moped flying bike thing, and there's a flash forward 3 years in time. After the time skip, Vincent is brooding in the town of Calm in the middle of a festival, which is rudely interrupted by a bunch of soldiers attacking, herding up some people, and killing others. This is where the first mission begins. So in this mission you walk around the streets of Calm, killing generic masked soldiers with your triple-barreled gun. Whilst travelling through the level you may think you are getting loads of ammo, but of course you use 3 bullets at a time. This first part prompts you to protect a bunch of civilians who are making some dreadful noises when these soldiers are following them. Now keen Final Fantasy VII fans will know that Calm is usually a peaceful place. It's the part in the original game where Cloud talks about the Nibelheim incident in a flashback, and it usually has some really nice music. It's a shame it's not really in this game though. The main goal of this first part is to find Reeve. In order to get through to where Reeve is, you need to find some key cards to get through doors, rescue a little girl, and beat a helicopter boss fight. On the way you get a few potions, lots of bullets, and some upgrades for your guns. Let's talk about the game's interface for a minute. You can activate a map with the up arrow on the D-pad, and activate items with the right arrow on the D-pad. This sounds pretty good on the face of it, but actually this seems to be selecting a random item from your inventory. I thought it was just a short command to select a potion, but when I ran out of them it selected my limit break item, which I didn't want to do. The map is pretty good, and you do have an option for a translucent map that appears on the screen while you are moving around, but a mini-map would have made things a little better. At the end of this stage you walk into a fountain area and a helicopter attacks you. The helicopter isn't so bad when you know what you're doing, but when I first thought it, I didn't realise that it would be really easy to run out of bullets. None of the boxes with items around the boss area include bullets. Funnily enough, there's no way to hit a helicopter without a ranged attack, so the only thing that I could do was just let it kill me. I decided to start at an earlier save, partway through an earlier point in the level, and just punched everything to save bullets. When I got to the last screen before the boss, I realised there was a little alcove with 180 bullets in it, meaning I didn't have to struggle through punching all these heavily armed goons. It felt like a total troll. At this point I was thinking that the name of the game should have been Dog of Crap. After fighting this boss, Vincent dives into a building in the most over-the-top way possible. After a few more enemies, a stereotypical tiny anime girl, and a giant monster thing attack. This game is absolutely bonkers. These guys are after the proto-materia, whatever that is.
The proto-materia.
And do this chant, who I guess is the game's big bad. For some reason, the stereotypical anime girl passes out before Beastman can attack you, and he decides to take her away. This is totally wonko because he's like,
"Challenge accepted."
Then the girl passes out, so he's urgent to get her away, but stops to say,
"I am Azul. We will meet again."
After this, Reeve appears and explains that Azul is a member of the Soviets. It's also worth noting that Reeve has really big feet. Reeve gets shot, and then it turns out that Reeve is actually Cait Sith. So after the shock that Cait Sith is in this game, you go back into the fountain area and gun down a whole bunch more soldiers. After what feels like eternity, the cavalry arrive and assist you. At this point, a guy gives you the opportunity to finally buy some supplies, including rations, which act as your item select with the right D-pad. This stops the item issue I mentioned before being much of a problem. These guys are in the WRO, which is the World Regenesis Organization. They are an organization dedicated to helping the world recover after the events of Final Fantasy VII and are led by Reeve. You finally get hold of a machine gun at this point, and it sucks. Like, it's better than the handgun, but machine gun? No rapid fire here. It's also worth pointing out at this point that Vincent jumps like a divvy. At the end of this sprawling passage, the evil helicopter from before makes a return, and this time, because of the machine gun and the fact that there are actual bullets littered around the stage, it's actually a lot easier. After beating this flipping thing, the actual Reeve turns up with a machine gun and starts talking to you. This game was clearly made in the mid-2000s, where game sound mixing was pretty rubbish, and it's a struggle to hear the voices over the music.
Reports our edge is under attack.
This is where the stage finally ends. At this point, there's a cutscene where Rosso the Crimson appears, voiced by Mary Elizabeth McGlynn with an accent.
Rosso the Crimson.
And then we're taken to the Room of Exposition, where Reeve explains a whole bunch of stuff to Vincent and casually throws in a "have you heard about a whole bunch of people who were abducted" line.
Have you heard of the mass disappearance that occurred recently in Juneau?
There's also a scene where some naked blue dude goes all, "I'm going to take over the world."
The time has come to cleanse this world.
Basically, Reeve explains all the soldiers who've been fighting are part of Deep Ground, who are a military organisation related to Shinra, and the Soviets are an even more secret organisation that Reeve doesn't know much about. Oh, and the naked blue dude is Vice, the guy that the soldiers were hailing earlier. After that lengthy chat, some dogs attack the van you're in. There's also some weird jump cuts when Vincent shoots them. After all that frivolity, an on-rail shooting part begins, and a bunch of Lion King rejects attack the van you're in. You get this awesome minigun, and have to kill them all. Eventually, you climb on the roof and have to do the same thing again without the minigun. Why couldn't I have just kept doing that? I was enjoying it. After leaving the truck, the game feels even more like the Lion King, as you're surrounded by some beasts in a gorge, and a Crimson Hound attacks you. A seemingly infinite amount of hounds surround the Crimson boss and maul all your health away. This boss has the opposite issue that the helicopter had earlier, in that it throws loads of bullets your way and no health. I have no idea why these random hounds are carrying ammunition. It will forever be a mystery. After this fight, you get no respite, and the biker twats from Mars attack you in full force. They aren't so bad, but I had no potions at this point due to being mauled up by the wolf pack from earlier, so I died pretty quickly. When you continue, your health is fully restored, so that's pretty good. After dying to the cast of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, I realised I was playing an RPG, because the game gives you the option of being able to trade EXP you've gathered for guild to buy items, or cash in your EXP to level up. To be honest, you could probably just mash X and not notice, as the game gives you pretty plentiful drops of gil whilst playing casually anyway. Vincent travels to Edge and meets this Quistis Trape lookalike, who is also underdressed for the weather. Her name is Shalua, and she is a scientist working for the WRO.
Shalua Ruin of the WRO.
She's our friend. We like her. After speaking with One-Eyed Quistis, she can move around Edge freely. I got to a part where I was prompted to kill some snipers, and then the snipers killed me. I then had to get up to this bit another 3 times, as the snipers kept killing me first. This is the right time to mention that the game throws optional sub-objectives at you, but doesn't make a clear distinction between them and what you need to actually do to progress the story. What the game actually wants you to do is to go into this alley to trigger a cutscene of a little boy being chased by some soldiers. After you've followed the boy, you get access to a jukebox, which you can buy items at. It's at this point I realised that you can actually cycle through quick select items with a left button on the D-pad, so what I said earlier about the item selection being like roulette, I take back. This kind of represents a bigger problem with the game though. It's a really unique design shooter, but doesn't hold your hand enough or explain what you need to do well in the slightest. Like there's a Quistis Trape lookalike in the game, but no tutorial? When you eventually catch the kid, he asks if you have a card key, and then runs off exclaiming you know someone that does. I'll give you 3 guesses of what happens next. We've had badly explained controls, bonkers storyline, not enough items. What's left from the bad game design handbook? That's right, a fucking escort mission! So you have to follow Princess Ruto here through this building and across this bridge. Of course you would follow him if he actually moved. Speed up, you little bastard! Come on! This little cretin literally won't move if anything on screen is attacking, so you have to take out the snipers and wolves just so he can open the door for you. When you eventually get to the end of this section, there's actually a really heartfelt scene where this kid talks about how his parents have been killed by the soldiers and he wants Vincent to avenge their deaths.
Please, please, help me avenge their death.
Then of course Vincent walks off and leaves this orphan alone in the middle of the city. Good one, Vince. Here's a tip from the top too. Make sure you go back into this building with a jukebox and buy as many potions as you can, because if you die at this point in the game, then you have to go all the way back to the beginning of the escort mission. Take it from someone who's been there. We'll say no more about it. After a bunch more dogs and guys shooting you, you come to a jukebox outside a building, which just screams, "There's a boss coming." This boss is actually really well designed, as it features a big dude who launches rockets at you and hits you if you stand still, accompanied by snipers who hit you when you are moving. The issue is, in order to take the snipers out from a distance, you have to stand still, which big dude here won't let you do. The only real way to beat this boss is to go right up to the snipers, kill them, and then take on the boss alone. It's a great little bit of design, and I actually really enjoyed the fight. After the fight, Vincent is confronted by Rosso, who is also underdressed for the weather. I'm beginning to notice a pattern. Rosso is a member of the Sphettes, who explains that the proto-materia is what allows Vincent to transform into a beast. She needs this to summon Omega, whatever that is.
The key to controlling Omega.
Vincent transforms and then passes out. He flashes back to memories of Lucrezia and then wakes up in Shalua's lab in the HQ of the WRO. Apparently Vincent has the Chaos gene, but there's not much time for talking as Deep Ground attacks the WRO base. In this mission, you need to gun down a whole bunch of soldiers with music playing that doesn't match the action in the slightest. Oh, and guess what? If you manage to gun all these guys down and traverse the multi-leveled maze of corridors and die, you've got to do it all over again. You eventually get to this game's version of Home Alone, where one of the soldiers rolls a barrel down the stairs to hit you. And just if this wasn't frustrating enough, this little twat shows up again. At this point, the game throws robots who are resistant to bullets at you, but you have to use melee attacks to hit. This wouldn't be so bad if they weren't backed up by soldiers who reduce your health to near zero before you can get close enough to punch. In this room, there's a pool table. How useful. The little girl Shelke from before appears. Apparently she's actually 19, but stuck forever as a 10-year-old or something weird. I don't know, but what I do know is she is the most annoying boss ever. So she has these weird lightsaber type things and just runs around stabbing you. Most of her attacks are impossible to avoid without jumping. The problem with jumping though is it stops you from targeting her, making her nearly impossible to hit. Gee game, it might have been useful if you could dodge! Eventually, after many attempts, I realised the best thing to do was to just tank the damage she threw at me and blast her at close range with a rifle. When she does the weird jump on the walls attack, all you have to do is jump and avoid her until she goes back to attacking normally. Eventually, she goes down. Her fight is followed up by a fight with Azul, who is a complete breeze, as you can just run away from him and attack the barrels he stands next to. He's done in about 2 minutes. She is easy. Vincent decides to go to the Shinra mansion in Nibelheim to investigate what's going on. So next we're going to a sewer, because it would be a crime to have a Final Fantasy VII game without one. It's totally boring, and you just have to plow through a bunch of Sahagins or Shahagins or whatever you want to call them. There's not much to say other than, it's a sewer. When you get to the end, Vincent reflects on Lucrezia again, and their relationship.
Vincent Valentine reporting for duty, ma'am.
The cat's back, and he walks like a dick. Reeve has sent Cait Sith to track down where Deep Ground are taking the abducted people. This is a weird stealth section where you play as Cait Sith. It doesn't really make sense to just be cut and pasted into the game at this point, and it's a pretty annoying section. Eventually I got so bored of trying to work out what was going on, I just charged past the guards and didn't have much issue. At the end of this section is probably the darkest thing I've ever seen in Final Fantasy.
Good gracious me!
So a bunch of screaming people are pulled into what is presumably the live stream by a massive hand, and then there's a shot of a child's Moogle teddy bear just floating there. I mean, that's horrific! Cait Sith is then nabbed by Nero, who is another member of the Sphettes. After this, we're taken back to Vincent, who meets Lucrezia's hologram in the Shinra mansion, which explains how Omega has awoken. You've then got to run through the mansion as Vincent, which is also dull. You end up coming to a section where a time limit appears, and you're instructed to deactivate the mines. I had no idea how to do this safely, so I just walked over them, and accomplished the objective. I guess technically I activated the mines, but I'll take it. It's difficult to show off in a video, but the real thing that makes this game so boring is the lack of dynamic music. In similar action games, when combat starts, the music gets more intense or louder, or changes entirely, but here the background music has no bearing on what's going on at all. It really just goes to show how useful dynamic music is in games of this style. After eventually arriving at the iconic mansion room, you are attacked by Wally's evil cousin, who is called Black Widow for some reason. Let's just count. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, what's happened to the other 4 legs? This boss is really easy. Just walk around it, shoot, and avoid the laser. If you run out of bullets or health, you can just go buy more from the jukebox in the corner. After beating the 4-legged spider, Rosso attacks and steals the proto-materia. As she's about to kill you, Yuffie appears and saves the day. Even though this is taking place 3 years after the intro, somehow Yuffie looks younger?
Yuffie, kiss her Froggy! Feast your eyes on... Whoa!
So next you start off in a forest to take on the invading forces of Deep Ground again, and come across the hounds you fought earlier along with some bugs. At this point it's pretty clear that none of the enemies have particularly unique attacks, and mostly feel like reskins of the same enemy. I got to the clearing of reduced frame rates, and thank god I found a limit breaker because it enabled me to smash everyone in this area pretty quickly. The next part consists of having to defend against loads of choppers with a minigun. This is pretty dull by the time you get to chopper 8, and oh, if you die, you have to do the whole forest again. Good times. After this, I didn't go back to the jukebox in the clearing, which to my shame is the worst gaming mistake I've ever made, because as soon as you go through this door, you are locked into the next section which has no place to buy any items. You are pretty much stuck with what you have, and you have to consider the trade-off of losing health fighting all the enemies, or having a whole lot more support fire attacking you when you're confronting the boss. After about 10 attempts, I decided to take out all the enemies, and then make a run for the other side of the structure. This had a limit breaker in it, which healed me, and enabled me to smash the living hell out of the boss. Thank god this was here. After finally beating this part, there's a little more action, and then there's a cutscene where Shelke is betrayed by Azul.
You're no longer required.
And then this happens.
Shelke! I'm sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't a better sister. I'm sorry I let you suffer. For so long. Vincent, take care of her, will you?
Wait.
Shelke, I'm glad I was able to find you. And remember, I'll always love you. Why?
So after that emotional sucker punch, and a literal slap from Yuffie, Shelke comes to her senses.
Someone they care about.
Shelke has a bit of a moment with Vincent, as it turns out she can sort of read his mind, which is probably the least unusual thing about the game so far. Conveniently, Shelke has all of Lucrezia's research in her head, and offers to help the WRO piece together what's going on. Here is where Cid appears with a whole bunch of airships to help the WRO attack Deep Ground.
Come on, get on board!
So we're on the bridge of Cid's airship, and have to spend a bit of time walking around before we get on with the story. We now have the opportunity to talk to the WRO members on board the ship, like this enthusiastic lady here.
Beautiful, isn't it? I've been a crew member for almost 3 years now. You'd think after a few hundred flights, I get tired of the view.
I'm so enthusiastic about everything. I love the sky. Show me the sky. This is the first time the game slows down enough to let us talk to the NPCs, which is actually quite cool. Well, it would be cool if the conversation added to the story. I call this place the Waste of Time Plane. All the characters really say is, we'll speak in the meeting. When you get to the meeting, this is it.
Alright, our old buddies and the remaining WRO squads will lead the ground assault.
Shelke is trying to upload herself into the computer system for some reason, and finds out that Omega is the final weapon that is part of Deep Ground's plan. We see a cutscene where Cloud, Tifa and Barret attack Midgar and land, and Cloud fights Rosso briefly, which is probably the best part of the game yet. Vincent lands in Midgar in the train graveyard, and there's a lady who talks about her family member who died when the plate from Sector 7 fell.
My brother and I used to play here all the time. My mom didn't approve, though. After she died, my brother joined a Shinra resistance group, but was killed when the plate fell and...
This is the first time that an NPC is really added to the world building of the game, and it's done really well. These rover things attack, and then these guys on jetpacks attack. At first they seem really hard, but you can cheese them by hiding in this train, where there's an item shop right behind you, and you can pick them off one by one. This part is easily the best part yet, as the enemies are pretty varied and the world seems somewhat connected to the rest of the Final Fantasy VII universe. So we get more generic run and gun stuff, and then end up confronting Rosso. She is a nightmare. Basically her health is stupidly high, and the fact that you haven't got a proper dodge just makes the fight unbearable. The strategy I used for her was to tank her damage, shoot her, go to the little shop in the corner, buy 2 mega potions and keep repeating the process. After about 8 times round of this, I finally killed her and then moved on with the story. The next level throws 2 more spider robots at you, which by this point are a doddle and not really worth dwelling on. After going down some boring as sin lifts, you come face to face with Azul. Azul is a breeze in his first form, but halfway through he transforms into his beast mode.
Feel the wrath of Azul the Cerulean!
and can only be hurt with magic. All I'll say is thank God I actually had some materia to equip, because my gun attacks did no damage without it. After running around in literal circles waiting for the MP points to recharge so I could actually cause damage to him, he eventually fell. Mummy, I don't want to play Dirge of Cerberus anymore! After nailing Azul, Vincent travels into Deepground's true base. It's a pretty dull and overly long level. Vincent confronts Nero, who is a really underwhelming boss fight. Shelke uses the connection she discovered with Vincent earlier to encourage him, and then sees Lucrezia's memory of Vincent's father talking with Lucrezia as he died. Shelke then begins to think of her sister, and then cries, apparently for the first time. It turns out that Nero has absorbed Shelke, so naturally Vincent uses the power of friendship to rescue her. After this, Vincent places Shelke in a chamber to revive her, and the most annoying boss fight up until this point occurs. Here we fight another helicopter, this time inside. It's particularly irritating because it launches missiles at you, and then hides. The idea is that you're supposed to hide behind these barricades to stop the missiles from hitting you, but if you do that, there's no guarantee that this Burke won't swoop down and hit you, or this Burke won't crash into you. And that's the end of that fight. Thank goodness we won't have to do that again. Vincent then heads up to confront Nero's brother Vice with Yuffie, and then Nero naturally appears and turns into a spider. By the way, if this plot seems really convoluted, it's because it is. Also, remember what I said about Shelke, Azul and the helicopter being annoying bosses? Well, they have absolutely nothing on. Let's just check what this guy's name is. Nero. Nero. Because Nero is a total wimp, he hides behind this crystal shield, which is really difficult to break. None of your attacks do any damage to his life bar while the shield is active. There are two strategies that you can follow to beat this guy. 1. Keep firing at the shield until it breaks, and use the brief time it stays broken to damage the boss. All you have to do is avoid the lasers from the sentries, but it takes a lot of time and you may run out of bullets. 2. Destroy the sentries so that when the shield breaks, it stays broken long enough for you to damage the boss. The problem with this strategy is that after you've destroyed all 3 of the sentries, the boss starts throwing fireballs at you which sap your health really quickly. Once you get his health down halfway, he transforms into his next form, and is actually a lot more simple. Here Nero appears in 5 different locations at random, and you just have to shoot him once until his health bar depletes. This is straightforward, but he also drains your health while you're attacking. First time I got to this, my palms were sweating so much, and I managed to get him all the way down to just one more shot, and then he killed me. This death sends you all the way back to the beginning of the Nero segment, which no matter what I did, I couldn't beat again with the 2 methods I mentioned previously. Remember how I said earlier that when you die, the game gives you gil to spend on items? Well, there's a problem with that on this boss fight, because when the game reloads, it puts you straight into the fight with Nero with nowhere to buy items. Oh, that's alright, I'll just go back to an earlier part in the level. Let's see here. So in order to get a bunch more gil to afford recovery items and bullets, I needed to do a bit more damage to the helicopter, die, claim the gil and repeat until I had around 20,000, which I figured would be enough to get me the items I needed. I won't tell you how many times I repeated this boss, but it was more than 10 and less than 12. Because I did not want to do this boss again, I decided to look up online strategies for how to beat Nero, which was where I learned that you can upgrade your guns. The game doesn't exactly make it clear you can do this, as the focus has been on gil or XP up until this point, but thank God you can. That's all I'll say. I used some of my gil to upgrade my weapons, and Nero went down first time. So there's a lesson learned when playing a game of this era. It's really not going to hold your hand with how to play. After beating Nero up, he retreats to his brother Vice, who kills him. What? After loads of exposition, it turns out that Vice is actually possessed by Hojo, who uploaded his consciousness into the internet 3 years prior. So basically, this whole game is Hojo's master plan. Then of course, Shelke sends an image of Lucrezia to Vincent, and of course, he powers up to the same level as Vice, and now you can take him on. After Vice is beaten, Nero returns from the dead and comes in and casts Hojo out, allowing Nero and Vice to fuse and then also join with Omega. These are just words on paper at the moment, I have no idea what's going on. Vincent then transforms into Chaos, and a whole bunch of bonkers, kind of-ish, on-rails, maybe but not really shooting sections take place. Basically, it's time for Vincent to take on Omega in his final form. Now here is the cheesiest scene I've ever seen in a video game. Just watch.
The rest is up to you.
Guess I have no choice. It's time to save the world.
You fight 3 stages of the last boss, and they are all pretty pathetic. It feels a lot like Vice should have been the last boss, because this whole section just feels a little tacked on. The only thing worth noting is that the final phase of the boss fight throws a meteor-esque attack at you, which pretty much usually one-shots you, so as long as you've popped a phoenix down, you should be golden. Vincent saves the day, and the life stream returns to the planet. The game ends with Shelke in non-robot clothes, and Vincent looking over a nice meadow. So that's the end of the most insane game I've ever played. So what did I think of it overall? Overall, the game is a mixed bag, so I understand all the mixed reviews now. I'd imagine a lot of hardcore Final Fantasy fans could kind of forgive the sins of this game because they wanted to find out more storyline. This is actually a sequel to Final Fantasy VII, so there's stuff happening afterwards, which is really interesting. And there were really some good ideas here, and I can understand why people might feel nostalgic for this game. But I'd imagine more casual, non-Final Fantasy players probably didn't understand it at all. It's a little bit, you know, bonkers and what the hell's going on. I don't think this would be a game that would draw people into the Final Fantasy world. It's almost like you have to know what's going on a little bit before you play it, and the game itself isn't really enough to make you really want to play more if you've played any other action-adventure game. I think this is probably a step up from very, very early action-adventure games, like ones on the PS1 maybe, but anything after Devil May Cry, I think, that I've played anyway, certainly trumps this, so I wouldn't recommend it for action-adventure fans. If you're a Final Fantasy VII fan, then probably better to just watch one of the story sort of cutscene summary videos you can find online, as opposed to forking out probably however much money this game is and getting a PS2 to get it to load. Unfortunately, at this point, Square haven't released a remake or remaster or whatever of this game. Who knows, something like that might come in the future. I would say we can only hope, because maybe they'll improve upon some of the stuff I've said here, because again, it just feels like a half-baked cake, really. You know, there was some really good stuff here. It could have been better. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, share it around, all that kind of jazz stuff if you liked the video. And let me know what you thought of the game if you played it in the comments below. See you later.